Hello folks, hope you're having a great day today. Hey, today I want to take a look at the next story that I have set aside in my sort of October that's set aside for the Cthulhu Mythos, where I'm taking a look at a Cthulhu Mythos story, basically every other week or so. We're about ready to hit the 8th story. This is going to be another one by good old Robert E. Howard, the guy who wrote Conan, some other characters too, like Solomon Kane, and so forth, that's out there. So we're going to be taking a look here at Nameless Cults. This is a book this is a collection of all of his sort of weird horror stuff that was put out by his stuff. Basically, the book Nameless Cults he creates. We've already taken a look at one of his stories that's in this, The Black Stone, that's set in the Cthulhu Mythos. Now today we're going to be taking a look at The Thing on the Roof, which is another one of these stories. Now, The Thing on the Roof is a much shorter short story, and so forth. But basically, again, what I'm doing is I'm taking a look at all of the many sort of the writers and so forth who wrote in the Cthulhu Mythos as created by H.P. Lovecraft in the 20s as a part of this Halloween sort of time. People care more about, because people care more about horror now. It's a good time to talk about horror, even though you can tell I've been obsessed about it for a long time. I've kind of waited, and here I am with my happy Halloween tie, even though it's not Halloween. I'm dedicating basically an entire day of my life, a Saturday, basically spending like 12 hours today just recording a whole lot of videos on this to get them ready to go for the month and so forth. And then I'm going to be spending like every other day, I'm giving you some videos, getting you caught up, talking about various things that are related to Cthulhu Mythos and so forth. And then we're going to spend some time really sort of take a deep dive into a lot of these great classic stories. And so forth. And H.P. Lovecraft in the Cthulhu Mythos pushed past normal sort of horror boundaries into these sort of strong gothic horror sections and setups, and where the entire world is out to get you. There are darker things out there, and the more you learn, the crazier you are going to get. For example, in the previous short story, which I don't think I'm going to ruin it for you and so forth, the last line that you get from the Black Stone from Robert E. Howard is the following line: "Man was not always the master of the earth, and is he now? Man was not always the master of the earth, and is he now?" This idea that we're now seeing in Jordan's version of the Cthulhu Mythos too, is that we are not the ones that are on top. We're tiny, insignificant little things. And the more we realize our tiny little roles that we have and how tiny we are in the universe, the more mad we're going to go with the knowledge. And the safest thing for us all to do would be to run off and just go into a second dark age, and so forth, and to leave all our sort of questing and things behind. Because the more we learn, the worse it's going to get for us, and so forth. So that's kind of this idea. This cosmic indifference and knowledge man was not meant to know are going to be basically kind of twinned with the Cthulhu Mythos. And so now we're going to take a look at the 8th story that I'm looking at. The first 6 were Lovecraft ones, and then the last 2 have been Robert E. Howard's. Next, I'm going to take a look at Frank Belknap Long for the last 2 to round up my first 10 stories. So again, let's take a look. We're going to be doing The Thing on the Roof. Now, in The Thing on the Roof, basically, and so this is actually a very short story by Robert E. Howard. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the sort of the review, the synopsis, and so forth. But basically, what's going to happen is basically going to have a couple of folks that are here hosting an event and so forth in regards to the book Nameless Cults and so forth. And basically, one person's going to be looking for a copy of Nameless Cults, which is the sort of book that Howard has as his major sort of work that's in the Cthulhu, that's in his section of the Cthulhu Mythos, that's heavily used by people that are researching. It was written by von Junst and so forth. So he's going to one of his friends to see if he has a bigger copy that he can use and so forth. His friend's going to say, "Hey, there's only a handful of copies that are out there," and so forth, but let me see what I can do for you. And while they're talking about some of the things that are happening and so forth, they're going to talk about some various quests, various things that they've been doing and so forth. And one of them is going to have the one that's being the host will have not the narrator, but the host will talk about a recent trip he made down to South America, where he was basically doing a sort of exploration into this god, sort of this Temple of the Frog sort of style of setting and so forth, and had come back with this gem. And he says that some of the things there are very similar to a black stone that they saw over in Hungary, which is obviously a shout out to his first book, his first story, The Black Stone, which is set in Hungary, and so forth. But they're going to have markings similar to those that were found over there, and so forth. And there's going to be a lot of sort of similar things happening. over here. And then he came back with this sort of gem and so forth, and kind of shows it, and they kind of realize the gem is more than just a gem or a treasure, but it's actually something more powerful and palpable and dark and evil at the same time. And then there's going to start hearing some things on the rooftop. And the host is going to say, uh-oh, something's come for this, and so forth. He's going to push the narrator out of the room in order to protect the narrator. So our narrator is going to be removed from the story, not going to see what happens. Something crashes through the roof, and then you hear noises of something escaping. When they're able to get back into the room, they see that the thing is gone. The room has been badly damaged and so forth. And there are like little marks of some sort of a beast that came down and then left again. And that's kind of the story. And then that's it. Like, again, it's more of a flash fiction, so I gave you the whole review. It's only like 8 pages long and so forth. But there you go. Feel free to take a look at it and so forth. I obviously give you the very, very quick spoiler version. So feel free to go take a look at it, take a deeper dive into it. There's a lot of things that happen. But that's basically the story in a nutshell. And basically the only aspect that you're going to get, and it's very similar actually to the Blackstone, in that we're not going to get a lot of things from Howard that are set in the Cthulhu Mythos. You're not seeing them, they're not name dropping Cthulhu or Cthagua, they're not name dropping, Shub-Niggurath or the Necronomicon, right, or anything like that. We're not going to, Arkham or Miskatonic University, right? You're not seeing like all these name drops and so forth. Instead, like the Black Stone, there was a character that could summon who I think is Cthagua, but you never hear about it, and so forth. It's never name dropped. And similarly, you're only going to see places like the nameless cults and stuff that he created. You're going to see that again here, but again, nothing more. And I think that's good. I think this strong world building. We're not, Howard knows what Lovecraft has learned, that using these in the Cthulhu Mythos is more about window dressing. It's about a way to spice a story and make it stronger, not a way to saturate it, just like salt. Here's a great example. Last night, I was playing Dungeons & Dragons with some friends, and he was playing over at his place, and he got out, and we were getting hungry. It was probably like 11 o'clock at night, so he got out some pizza rolls, I think they're Totino's, to heat them up and so forth. And he added, because he just likes to add salt, he added salt to the Tostino's pizza rolls. Well, they're already salty. They already have sodium. They already have heavy amounts of sodium and so forth. And so I'm eating these pizza rolls that he made for the group while we're playing Dungeons and Dragons last night. And it's just disgusting how much salt that there's now on it too. By adding salt to something that was already salty and didn't need it, it made it so it was unpalatable. And I think that that's basically how the Cthulhu Mythos is if you're not careful with it as a writer. Is that if you're overusing your salt, it's not going to be palatable. It's not going to be something that's fun. And I think that Lovecraft, and for example, The Colorless Space, which we've looked at, is great at this. It barely has any examples of the mythos in it at all. Haunted of the Dark, the 6th story we looked at, very few examples. He spends like a paragraph mentioning some things from the Cthulhu Mythos, and then that's it. The rest of the story sits as a story. And Howard has learned this tiny little pieces here and there just to help season it so that it's palatable and good. You don't want to put too much salt on it. Just like you don't want to add salt to pizza rolls. That's just silly. Who would want to do that? But anyway, you get the idea. And so I think Howard understands that craft very well. And so I think he's a good writer. Hey, look, we still read Robert E. Howard. He's a good writer, right? We know who he is and so forth. We've read Conan, we've read some of his other stuff. And I've taken a look at some of his things for you too. Now, I do think there was a missed opportunity with this story. I wish Howard had shown us the journey rather than tell us about it. Because we could have picked up this story earlier and then actually seen the journey into South America. And I think that would have been very compelling. I think if he had spent 20, 25 pages on that, fleshing that out, us seeing South America and going to that place and so forth, and then at the end spend 5 or 6 pages with the person who was now hosting a group of people, and then you're seeing this treasure that was found and so forth and seeing the results. I think that would have been a good coda to this story. But I think it would have been much stronger as the story had this exploration. First of all, Cthulhu Mythos stuff doesn't usually sit in South American places. It's typically in England or New England or something like that, like this story is. So it would be nice to kind of get out of these spaces. That's also, by the way, one of the things I liked about the Black Stone is that it's getting you into Hungary and you're not into dark tones. Now, I don't like the fact that it still had a lot of those sort of Cthulhu Mythos elements of, hey, there's a sacrifice to an altar, occultic things that were happening, and so forth. But still, I do like the fact that it was getting out, and this would have been fun, I think, to have done the same. If we had gotten out of, the sort of things, and I also think that Robert E. Howard writes that story very well. Red Nails, which is a story in the Conan mythology, is one of the strongest stories he writes, and it's set in sort of this pyramid and sort of this ancient thing with these different cultures and people, and they're trying to take each other out, and Conan and Valeria are adventuring in it and so forth. It is an incredibly strong story, and this could have been, I think Thing on the Roof could have been the Red Nails of the Cthulhu Mythos, and I think there was a missed opportunity by Howard not to have actually shown us this adventure and this expedition as the first part, as maybe Act 1 and Act 2 of this story. I feel like we were just doing Act 3. And so I do think that was a huge missed opportunity by Howard to just show us Act 3. And it's just, by this time, I don't care about the narrator. I haven't spent much time with her. I'm not invested into the narrator and so forth. So I do think that was a missed opportunity by Howard, so to be fair. But there you are. So, have you read it? Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. I'd be happy to engage you with it more if there's anything, or if you agree or disagree with anything that I read, I'm happy to sort of talk with you more about it. Also, hey, I want to thank you so much. We all have such busy days and busy lives. So the fact that you spent this time with me and watched all the way to the video, I do appreciate that. And finally, hey, if you watch this video, there's no reason not to hit that subscribe button. I really do try to do a deep dive into a lot of these sort of older classic forgotten fantasy, science fiction, and horror sort of classics from this era, or a little earlier, a little later, and so forth. Things that we may have forgotten about, or things you may have heard about but never actually read and taken the time to. So I like to unpack those for you here. So if you enjoyed this, hit that subscribe button. There's going to be so many more to follow. And hey, once again, thanks for your time.